Welcome to the Personal Pension Radio Podcast, where it's all about helping you complete your financial journey to retirement. Discover time-tested strategies and get unconventional insights into wealth building and retirement that actually work. Break away from the herd and go for the retirement you dream of. And now, here's your host, the income engineer, Kraig Strom.
All right, let's see if I can hit that button. Got to hit the open mic button on my podcast software and then try not to hit it again real fast. So, hey, this is Kraig Strom. I am the income engineer broadcasting on my and my daughter's birthday week here in sunny Southern California. Now, if you're new to the show, really quick, my mission, deliver the retirement dream that Wall Street has promised. Wall Street promises this retirement dream, but they only teach half the instruction cookbook to actually achieve it. Maximum retirement income is not a savings equation specifically. It is a savings and distribution equation, and you've got to have the right blend. That is my specialty. That's where the title of the income engineer came from. And yes, someone asked me again recently, yes, I do own the registered U.S. Patent and Trademark Office trademark on the income engineer. Now, as you heard already, this is my daughter's birthday week and my birthday week, and so it's going to be a short and sweet episode. Some of you out there are cheering, saying, thank goodness, please get it over with. But I appreciate all of the feedback and what happens with this show, because I am a practicing, active, certified financial planning professional. Oftentimes this show becomes a little bit of quasi-therapy for me, because I've got to kind of deal with that human nature, and also the competitive messages that are out there in the world with it relating to financial planning can often be flat out wrong, contradictory. They're just different, right? So there's so many messages out there. It's just difficult. So sometimes this show can be a little bit of therapy for me. Right? Now, disclosure, I am not a certified public accountant. I'm not an attorney. I am a certified financial planning professional. All of that said, as qualified as I might be, please do not act on things that you hear on this show, and especially from things you hear from financial entertainers who are not licensed, not regulated, and just in general, you shouldn't be taking advice that is actionable over a podcast. You really want to meet with a qualified financial planning professional in person or on the internet. Nowadays, the world is a very small place. I meet with new folks all over the country here in the U.S., so please don't be afraid of having a virtual meeting, a go-to meeting, where you can actually have a face-to-face with a financial planner from pretty much wherever you are in the world. Now, today, I'm going to keep it right to the point. Rather than a watch your step segment, I want to jump right into Deal of the Week. Deal of the Week, as Clark Howard says, one of my favorite podcast and radio personalities. I love his very thrifty nature, how Clark Howard is, and I love that Deal of the Week. So I want to share a Deal of the Week so that maybe inspire you to save a few dollars and redirect it towards your retirement savings, or redirect it towards something that might really benefit you in the long run. And this week was specifically for my daughter's birthday week, and I was about to personally sell all of my snowboarding gear. So my daughter and I learned to snowboard several years ago, and it was one of our daddy-daughter events that we would do together twice a year. I would give her gifts in the form of events with me, rather than presents that were wrapped up specifically like, your typical Toys R Us birthday. So for me, for most of her life, for she and I, what I mean, is they were events. So one of those years was learning to snowboard. Well, it was kind of a sad realization this year that my daughter's off at college in Flagstaff, Arizona, and there's some beautiful snowboarding there, but I'm here in Southern California. it's very unlikely that I am going to go snowboarding without my daughter. It's not my thing. If you listen to this show long enough, you know that I'm a car guy and I do woodworking, so I've got my hobbies. So it's very unlikely that I'm going to go snowboarding without my daughter. So I thought, I'm going to sell my snowboard stuff. Now, I had not heard her talking about snowboarding either. I thought she'd kind of given up on it. So when I was actually looking at selling my snowboard stuff, I thought, well, might as well maybe put this, Madeline's snowboard stuff up for sale and put it up on Craigslist or OfferUp and just sell it. Well, right about the same time I'm thinking about that, my daughter called, and we got to talking about it, and I said, I was just actually looking at your snowboard stuff. And she says, well, that's good, because I actually was going to ask you for my birthday if you could actually ship that stuff to me, because I've got friends now at college and at work, and we can go snowboarding, and the snowboarding season's coming. So my heart sank a little bit, sad, but actually got relieved that she called me at the right time, to save from me having sold her snowboard stuff. So now I had a whole new plan. My new plan was to send to her, for her birthday, to send her the snowboard gear and all of her helmet and cold weather gear and all that. But I wanted to do something extra special. So I wanted to upgrade her system so that she would have the bindings, the snowboard boot bindings that she's always wanted. Now, these things are expensive, right? So the bindings that she wanted could be twice as much as the used Craigslist snowboard that I got her years ago. So buying bindings for her when she didn't really go snowboarding very much was kind of tough. It was a tough one to swallow. So what I did was I thought, well, okay, hold on. I'm not going to tell her about any kind of surprise or, my idea. I'm going to just check it out. So I went to the source of all knowledge and clearance deals, the interweb. I went on to Google and Craigslist, and I spent 5 minutes. This is the coolest part. 5 minutes, and popped up in Los Angeles 8 minutes from where I would be at a speaking event the next day. I found somebody selling a perfect pair for my daughter, perfect pair of snowboard bindings, and they were exactly the style that she would love. $80. $80. These things sell for $269 retail. I looked them up. They're still available for sale, retail, $269. And I got them cash for $80. The very next day, I drove into the speaking event where I was set to speak that day. And I met him, the gentleman who was selling these, because he was upgrading his own system. And bought them for $80 cash, 70% less than I would have paid retail. So the lesson, right? You hear me get all excited about saving the 70%. I love it. I think that's the way we should operate everything we do, right? So the lesson that I hope you take away from my deal of the week is never pay retail without checking the interweb. Just take a quick look around before you just go out and pay retail. Because heck, $269, that's a far cry from $80, right? $80, and my daughter will open those here on her birthday week. She'll open those not knowing that they are hiding in the bottom of the box that I sent her with all kinds of other stuff, and that'll be a huge surprise, and I'll get some good daddy points out of it. So that's my deal of the week, is another reminder that if you're not using Craigslist, OfferUp, eBay, if you're not using those apps on your phone, you're totally missing out. Please don't pay retail until you've double-checked a few places on the World Wide Web. Now, today I want to address a great listener question from David. David actually, more of a listener response from last week's podcast. So if you haven't listened to the last podcast, episode 136, I answered a question from a listener regarding 30-year mortgages versus 15-year mortgages. And David actually responded with some good points in here that I wanted to touch on, because he's not the only one that actually has sent back some feedback or given me some feedback on this. So I thought it was actually, there's enough interest swirling around this topic that I wanted to go ahead and use this as the subject matter for today's podcast as well. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode, you might want to do that. Go back and listen to the previous episode, and then you'll have a real basis for where this comes from, okay? Now, David says this. Among other things, I'm going to do my best to cover some of the key points, because I don't want to keep everybody on the podcast line forever and ever, but I will cover some of these because I get pretty excited about this. So David said, one thing that I missed while listening was the difference in mortgage interest paid for the longer loan. Great point, David. I did not cover that because it essentially got answered. The answer to the question came out in my mathematical comparison of a 15 versus 30 when you look at all the different pieces. Now, when you only look at interest, you absolutely save interest on a 15-year mortgage. You pay far less. So I used a $400,000 house in my example. So if you do the math on a $400,000 house over 30 years versus 180 months or 15 years, you actually save $180,000 in mortgage interest. No doubt that if all you look at is interest, the 15-year mortgage is specifically a better deal. Mathematically, you pay less interest, right? Now, that's the thing. If you only look at that one thing, if you get micro on it. However, my point is that when you look from a macro perspective on a real-world application, 30-year versus 15-year mortgages, the 30-year is just a safer. Number one reason that I would only tell people to do a 30 is just safety. It is the security of knowing that you have a lower payment. Now, David does make the point that you don't necessarily, he's making a point and an observation that perhaps I was suggesting that people go out and just buy a big expensive house because that's what the bank said they could afford. Absolutely not. I'm not suggesting that at all. You definitely still need to have a home that you can very comfortably afford, right? Very comfortably afford. Now, here's the thing. David also goes on to say this. You didn't really do any research into Dave's actual teaching. You took his advice out of context and did not accurately compare Dave teaching to Kraig teaching. Now, I will take issue with that because I meet very few people that I've met that listen to and consume as much Dave Ramsey as I do. Now, you might, if you've listened to this show enough, you might know that I'm not a huge fan of Dave Ramsey from some perspectives of his teaching, but I still listen because he is the dominant bully pulpit and financial entertainer in the country. He is. So I want to know what he's saying. But here's the thing. Dave Ramsey in every 30-year mortgage post that I can find. I mean, look it up. Just search, Google search, Dave Ramsey, 30-year mortgages, right? He is just adamantly opposed. You should never get a 30-year mortgage. There's no reason to ever get a 30-year mortgage. Even when you buy rental properties, you should pay cash for a rental property. But if you ever had to get a mortgage, you got to get a 15-year mortgage. That's just all throughout. Now, my favorite, though, is when Dave Ramsey contradicts himself. So you can actually go and find this, right? You can find this kind of stuff because I just know it's there because I've already found it. I've already consumed this information. But here's a great article just to give you an idea. The article is titled A $288,000 Mistake. $288,000 Mistake. Let's look, and this is from Dave Ramsey's website, where he says, let's look at two homeowners with identical incomes and 30-year mortgages. Okay? Now, it goes on in a subset to say, Dave doesn't recommend 30-year mortgages, but that's what most homeowners have. Okay, so they qualify. He doesn't recommend it. So this goes on now. Jane, homeowner, makes a regular house payment and invests $500 a month towards retirement over the lifetime of her mortgage. Now, what he's talking about in this article is that Jane has a 30-year mortgage, so she's investing the $500, maybe the difference between a 15 versus 30, but just she's able to invest $500 towards retirement. And at the end of that period of time, she has $2 million. Now, Joe, a different guy. Now, Joe listened to Dave Ramsey and got a 15-year mortgage, right? So Joe, homeowner, decides to double up. Well, sorry, my mistake. Let me read Dave Ramsey's article here. Joe, homeowner, decides to double up on his house payments. That's what it was. He has a 30-year mortgage, but he's going to pay it like a 15. He's going to double up on his 30-year mortgage. He pays off his mortgage in 15 years, but he has zero retirement savings. To catch up with Jane, he'll have to invest $2,600 a month. So look at it another way. Jane will invest a total of $180,000 for retirement. But because she started, now let me bold this in and highlight this. Because she started early, compound growth does the heavy lifting. Joe must invest a total of $468,000 for the same outcome. A $2 million nest egg and a paid-for home, right? That's the same outcome. Which bottom line looks better to you? Right? Which bottom line looks better to you? He basically, in this article, just said, hey, you know what? It's better to have a 30-year mortgage, invest for retirement at $500 a month, because if you try and pay off the house and then invest, you're way behind. You're way behind. This is why Dave says you should first invest 15% of your income for retirement before you work towards paying off your mortgage. I get that. Got it, right? Check. But right in his own article, basically saying that if you have a 30-year mortgage and you invest your $500 a month right now, instead of trying to pay down a 30-year mortgage like a 15 and invest later, he verifies what I talked about last time, that the math doesn't lie. You are always better if you start your savings clock earlier than later, right? Absolutely. And if you're putting money towards a 15-year mortgage, you do not have extra money necessarily to put towards retirement. Okay? That's the thing. Now, my listener Dave goes on to say, to me, it sounded as though you were advocating for a new young couple to take out a $400,000 mortgage with no regard for personal income or budget limits. Fair enough. Again, don't have a lot of time to be able to give all the details. In a podcast, I cannot give all of those kind of details, but here are some follow-up comments to help you understand. This couple has income and savings enough that I spoke of in the last episode to comfortably afford a 30-year mortgage on a $695,000 house in reality. Now, I changed the numbers because I have a national audience and some people might choke at the idea of a first-time home purchase worth $695,000. $400,000 just seemed like a much more palatable number, so I changed the number. The reality is this couple has a very healthy income, they have excellent savings, and the question was 30 versus 15, 30 versus 15. They are much safer, much stronger position paying for their house on a 30-year mortgage, no doubt. But their number was actually $695,000. Now, those of you listening in other parts of the country, you might be thinking, holy crow, it's a crazy house, $695,000. The reality is it's one of the least expensive homes in their Southern California market where they could buy a home, right? And then someone yells out, they should rent instead. Well, that sounds good until you realize that the rental market in certain Southern California areas can cost over $3,000 a month for a basic 2 or 3 bedroom little townhome, tiny little things. The rental market and the housing market in Southern California is ridiculous. So I used a little different numbers just to make it more palatable for my large audience. The reality or the truth of the matter is this couple actually has plenty of savings, plenty of income to comfortably, meaning they've got cushion to comfortably afford a 30-year mortgage. Now, could they have gotten a 15? Sure, they have enough income and savings that they could pay their 30 like a 15 if they wanted. But as Dave and other people have said, most people don't. And that's fine. The math adds up that paying a 30 and investing the difference is generally better. Now, some final points here. One final point I'll mention from Dave. He says, I think that you've missed the main idea behind Dave Ramsey's instructions. He admits that over and over again, mathematically, his steps may not be the best way. That's another thing that bothers me. He admits it all the time that his math may not be exactly the best math. But if it was just about the math and humans were disciplined enough to follow the math perfectly, everything would work out. Well, here's my take on that. BS. I call complete BS on Dave Ramsey because he has the bully pulpit. He is the top financial entertainer in the country, and he could use that platform to give his listeners a wake-up call. Like, hey, you know what? Let's give his listeners the truth, right? The truth is his math doesn't work, and if you really want to save money, if you really want to get out of debt, if you really want to save for retirement, there's certain things you got to just stand up, suck it up, and do it in a certain way, and it will work out better, right? When I did my math last week, it was not a little bit better. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars better. It was gigantic better. And yet, Dave still teaches this, we've got to have everybody feel good about it. No! He has an opportunity to give a real solid kick in the butt wake-up call to his loyal listeners, and he never does. And sadly, I feel like he doesn't give that wake-up call because for so many years he's given out such bad advice, he kind of now owns it. He has to keep giving out the same advice. It has been printed in all of his material for decades now. You kind of have to keep giving the same advice over and over and over again because it's already been given. So anyway, I get all excited about that. Now, final thoughts. I believe Dave Ramsey's guideline principles are solid. They're a solid beginning for people, savings and emergency funds, etc., right? But his math is wrong. And his advice is risky when it comes to 30-year mortgages. The riskiest thing that a young family could ever do, I think, in one way, is get a 15-year mortgage that is completely rigid, right? Dave's math is wrong, but more importantly, it's dangerous advice for young families, for young, financially new families. It's not good advice. Right? Remember, you cannot pay a 15-year mortgage like a 30. I know most people don't pay a 30-year mortgage like a 15, but it doesn't matter. You can't do it if you can't do that with a 15-year mortgage if you wanted to. You couldn't if you had to, right? And you'll probably end up moving in 7 years and wish that you didn't have all of your equity and all of your cash tied up in your home earning zero. You see? So that's my final thought on it. Dave, I so appreciate the question. I really do. I do. And I appreciate everybody who are listening, who have the same kind of questions that are out there challenging this stuff. Please don't forget, ask questions. My email is Kraig@kraigstrom.com, Kraig with a K at kraigstrom.com. Please keep those questions coming. Thank you so much for the feedback. And I really appreciate all of the birthday wishes as well from many of you out there on my LinkedIn. Thank you so much to those listeners and friends out there who have actually thrown out those birthday wishes. Really appreciate it. Hey, don't forget, go out and find your deal of the week. If you find an awesome deal, send me an email at Kraig@kraigstrom.com. Tell me what your amazing deal was. Maybe I'll share it out on the podcast as well. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Personal Pension Radio podcast. If you missed anything during the show, that's okay. We took the notes for you. Check the show notes for links, offers, and a full transcript. And don't forget to head over to personalpensionradio.com and download your free retirement income report. While you are there, we would appreciate some iTunes love. Please leave us a fantastic rating on iTunes by going to personalpensionradio.com/iTunes. Thanks again for listening.
Now for the disclosure. Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended for solicitation, sale or purchase of any security or financial product. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and your tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed here. The term personal pension refers to a marketing name designed to educate future retirees and retirees about the economic principles behind creating their own pension-like income. The term personal pension is not intended to be confused with a defined benefit pension plan offered by an employer or by a government entity.